Okay, I want you to imagine you're about to give a presentation and you can't stop thinking about your bad haircut. Everybody in the audience notices your bad haircut. Your boss is sitting there. He or she is probably saying to themselves, man, that is a really terrible haircut. What was that person thinking? And then at the end of the presentation, turns out everybody had a good time. Everybody found your presentation informative. Nobody mentions the bad haircut. For you, the bad haircut was a major problem. It was weighing on your mind the entire time you were up there, but nobody else seemed to notice. So what was going on there? Well, what was happening is something called the spotlight effect. Now, the spotlight effect is a psychological phenomenon, and the definition is the phenomenon in which people tend to believe they're being noticed more than they really are. Being that one is constantly in the center of one's own world, an accurate evaluation of how much one is noticed by others is uncommon. So what this means in the public speaking context is that you are going to assume that certain shortcomings, flaws, errors, or mistakes that you're making are way more noticeable to the audience than they actually are. So a couple examples in public speaking would be being too harsh on yourself for saying filler words. This is something I see all the time with clients and students. For some reason, the myth of filler words has become a really huge issue. Of course, too many filler words is distracting, it's excessive. But for the most part, audiences don't notice a couple filler words here and there. They just don't notice. But you being extremely harsh on yourself for saying even a few filler words during the course of your presentation is a classic example of the spotlight effect, of assuming that they're noticing something that for you is a huge issue, but in reality, they're not even picking up on it. Another example is second guessing your word choice on specific words or phrases that just don't make any significant difference in the meaning. So for example, you could say, we developed and rolled out a new product. Or you could say, we built and launched a new product. Basically the same thing. Is one better than the other? Not particularly. It's just a question of which style of communication is more common within your organizational culture or your team. Do people tend to say built more, or do they tend to say developed more? That's really the only issue. But in terms of the meaning of the message, it's basically the same. So being hyper-focused on minor word choice issues like that is not significant, it's not meaningful, and it's not a good use of your time or energy as you're preparing your presentation. Another example is assuming that the audience is noticing certain things that they just don't, or that they just don't care about. So for example, the color of your shirt, or the fact that you took one step forward instead of one step back. Nobody really notices those things. If it becomes excessive, then yes, they are going to notice that. But the basic issue with the spotlight effect in public speaking is it's an issue of ignorance. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what specifically audiences really care about and what they don't. That's why we develop these narratives and these stories in our head about what is important, what I should be focusing on. And we forget the more important things, the actual issues that audiences are actually focusing on. So there's three things you can do to improve your awareness. Number one is to record yourself and watch yourself presenting or speaking on camera. Usually it's very jarring and uncomfortable for most people at the beginning, but eventually you get used to it. Observe yourself on camera, see what stands out to you as you're watching. If something stands out to you, it's probably going to stand out to an audience as well. If it doesn't stand out to you as you're watching, then it's probably not going to impact the audience either. So a good example of this was a client that I worked with. He was a very successful businessman, but he had a lot of stage fright and nervousness around public speaking. So we recorded him speaking at an event where he was presenting to about 50 people. He watched the video back afterwards and he noticed he was swaying. There was a constant, never-ending sway back and forth as he was presenting over and over again. Everything else was great. His delivery was great, his word choice, his presentation structure, but it was just that swaying motion that was extremely distracting. That's what jumped out to him. He was not aware of it before he saw it. So that's why recording yourself and watching yourself is so powerful. Second thing you can do is to get feedback from friends and colleagues or from a coach. You need a reality check. If you're just kind of in isolation developing your presentation or your speech, you don't have a clear sense of what is important. You need to wrap your head around how other people are perceiving you. So get feedback from people. Do some dry runs, do some practice and rehearsals in front of other people and see what they say. People that you trust to give you constructive criticism, people that are not just going to praise you no matter what, but people that actually have your best interests at heart and they want to help you improve. So there's a second major thing you can do to improve your awareness. And the third thing is to be very aware of the feedback and the input that you get from real audiences. So don't just get up in front of a group of people, give a presentation, sit down, and never think about it again. But actually ask people in real life presentation situations, whether in person or remote, ask them, hey, how did I do? Ask your bosses, ask your colleagues, get their input and their feedback. Anything that stood out to you? Is there anything that I could have done better? Is there anything that you really enjoyed or appreciated in my presentation? You want to get that kind of feedback. All of that is information that goes into your awareness and your understanding of how you're actually communicating. All right? So that's how you beat the spotlight effect in public speaking. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you next time.